Waking up a 6-year-old girl in a crowded homeless shelter is a masterclass in masking your own despair. You have to put on this grand performance, pretending everything is an exciting camping trip while your soul is actively crushing itself into dust. That morning, my daughter was searching for a matching sock in a plastic bin, trying her best to be brave for me. She looked up with this heartbreakingly sweet smile, completely unaware that her mother felt like an absolute failure. We stepped out into the biting winter air at dawn, the gravel crunching beneath our worn sneakers as we waited for the school bus. My little girl, Chloe, adjusted her oversized backpack and asked if she still had to use our old address when the teacher called roll. Before I could choke back my tears to answer, a pristine black luxury sedan pulled up directly to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a woman wrapped in a flawless wool coat, looking like she belonged in a high-rise boardroom rather than this forgotten corner of the city. It was my estranged grandmother, Marilyn Vance, a woman of immense wealth and zero tolerance for nonsense. She stared at the rusted sign of the shelter, then at my chapped hands, and finally down at Chloe's mismatched shoes. Her expression shifted from pure confusion to a cold, hard anger that made the air feel even colder than it already was. She looked me dead in the eyes and asked why on earth we were standing here instead of living in the brownstone she bought for us on Oak Street. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I blinked back total bewilderment. I stammered that I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about, because we did not own a home, let alone a brownstone. Marilyn did not argue or question my sanity. Instead, her eyes narrowed as she processed a sudden, terrible calculation. She knelt down to Chloe's height, speaking with a softness I had never heard from her before, and firmly told us both to get into the vehicle. The interior of the sedan was suffocatingly quiet as Marilyn gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She made a single phone call to her personal attorney, demanding to know exactly who signed for the keys to the Oak Street property and who had been pocketing the monthly utility statements. Listening to her clipped, commanding tone, a sickening dread began to pool in my stomach. I realized that my current nightmare was not just a stroke of bad luck, but the result of a calculated betrayal. Just 6 months earlier, my life had been completely ordinary until a sudden layoff forced me to seek temporary shelter with my parents. My father, Richard, had this incredibly smooth, reassuring voice that could convince anyone he was a saint, while my mother, Eleanor, mastered the art of passive-aggressive cruelty disguised as motherly advice. They welcomed Chloe and me into their guest room with open arms, insisting that family always protects family, and I foolishly believed they actually meant it. The hospitality evaporated within weeks, as Eleanor began dropping constant hints about how my presence was disrupting their peaceful retirement. They complained about Chloe toys, criticized my exhaustion after working double shifts, and treated our misfortune like an embarrassing stain on their pristine household. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, Richard sat me down and announced that they were giving us exactly 30 days to pack our things and find a new place to live. I spent every single break at my new retail job frantically scrolling through rental listings, but my meager savings could not cover the exorbitant deposits. The stress was eating me alive, but nothing prepared me for the night I returned home after midnight to find 2 taped cardboard boxes sitting out on the covered porch. My parents had locked the front door, leaving my entire life out in the cold, completely ignoring the timeline they had promised. When I pounded on the door, Eleanor cracked it open just an inch, whispering sharply that I was going to wake up the neighbors with my dramatic behavior. I looked past her shoulder and saw Chloe asleep on the hard entryway rug, her tiny coat bundled up beneath her head like a makeshift pillow. Richard yelled from the kitchen that they were doing this out of tough love to force me to become independent. They shut the door in my face, leaving me to scoop up my sleeping child and drive aimlessly through the dark. We spent the next few nights sleeping in the back seat of my compact car, eating cheap fast food until my bank account hit absolute zero. When Chloe's school counselor noticed her falling asleep in class, I finally broke down and admitted the truth, which led us straight to the family shelter intake desk. I never called my grandmother because Eleanor had spent years warning me that Marilyn despised weakness and would cut me off completely if I ever caused family drama. Now, sitting in the booth of a warm diner where Marilyn had driven us, the horrifying pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. My grandmother placed her phone on speaker on the table, dialing my mother, whose voice immediately answered with a sickeningly sweet, theatrical cheerfulness. Marilyn calmly asked how Chloe and I were settling into the new house on Oak Street, playing along with a trap I did not yet fully understand. Eleanor did not hesitate for a single second before lying through her teeth, gushing about how much I loved the backyard and how independent I had become. I sat there frozen, watching my daughter color a placemat, while my own mother painted a beautiful fiction to cover up the fact that she had left her granddaughter homeless. Marilyn let her spin the web of lies completely before hanging up without a single hint of anger in her voice. Marilyn looked across the table at me, her eyes flashing with a dangerous clarity as she explained the truth. She had purchased that brownstone outright for us 6 months ago, trusting my parents to deliver the deed and the keys to ensure Chloe had stability. Instead, Richard and Eleanor had quietly intercepted the property, put it on the luxury rental market, and had been collecting thousands of dollars in rent every single month while we suffered. The sheer audacity of their greed left me completely breathless, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold my coffee mug. Marilyn refused to let us return to the shelter for even another hour, checking us into a high-end hotel while her legal team quietly disassembled my parents' lives behind the scenes. She told me that my parents were hosting a massive anniversary gala in 3 days, and that we were going to attend the celebration together. On the night of the gala, I stood in front of the venue mirror wearing a simple navy dress Marilyn had purchased for me, my heart hammering in my throat. We walked into the grand ballroom, a place filled with soft lighting, expensive champagne, and extended family members who had not checked on me in months. At the far end of the room, my mother was buzzing around a massive projector screen, preparing to give a speech about family legacy. The moment Eleanor spotted me walking through the double doors, her practiced social smile completely shattered, turning her face a ghostly shade of pale. Richard froze mid-laugh, his champagne glass trembling as he realized I was not trapped in a shelter, but standing in front of him. Before they could scramble to concoct an excuse, Marilyn walked into the room, flanked by a serious man carrying a leather briefcase and a laptop. Marilyn walked straight to the podium, tapping the microphone to gather the attention of every single relative in attendance. She announced that before the festivities began, she wanted to showcase a very specific family investment that Richard and Eleanor had been managing. The projector screen lit up, displaying the official deed to the Oak Street house, followed immediately by the active rental listings my parents had posted online. The ballroom went deathly quiet as the next slide revealed the banking details, showing exactly how the rental income was being deposited into my parents' private accounts. Eleanor burst into frantic, desperate tears, screaming that they had mounting debts and that they always intended to give me the house eventually. Marilyn did not raise her voice once. She simply looked at them with utter disgust and announced she was stripping them of every dime of their inheritance. The man with the briefcase stepped forward to hand my stunned parents official legal documents, detailing a criminal investigation for fraud and immediate eviction protocols. Richard looked around the room, realizing his carefully constructed reputation had just completely evaporated in front of everyone they knew. Eleanor begged me to speak up and protect the family, but I simply looked at her and said she should have thought about family before turning my daughter homelessness into a business. Today, Chloe and I are finally living in our beautiful home on Oak Street, and her bedroom walls are covered in her own colorful artwork. My parents' respectable facade completely collapsed after the investigation, forcing them to sell their own assets to repay every single dime they stole from us. It turns out that blood does not make you family. Actions do, and I will never regret letting the truth come to light.